Welcome to Data Beats. If you haven't already, do subscribe. Today, Sonal Goyal, the founder of Zingg, is here to answer some questions about entity resolution and identity resolution. So, here we go. Hey Sonal,
Hey Arpit, glad to be here. Very excited.
let's jump right in, Sonal. First question for you. Please tell us what exactly is entity resolution?
Sounds like a very, a lot of jargon, entity resolution, but at the heart of it, it's actually saying that multiple records in your warehouse or on your data lake belong to the same real world entity. And this entity could be your customer, it could be a supplier, it could be location, just any noun that the business deals with.
Okay. So, identity resolution is a subset of entity resolution, right? Can you explain?
Yeah, so when we talk about identity, right, it's actually who you are, and entity resolution at a broader level is establishing what an entity is. So entity and identity, in fact, are very closely tied. But when we talk about identity, it's more related to the person. So like a customer or a citizen, those are identity resolution. Technically, that's what's identity resolution.
Okay, so identity resolution is a subset of entity
Yes,
resolution where the entity is the user, or like you said, a citizen, a person, right?
right.
Cool. So considering entity resolution is so important, why is this still a largely unsolved problem?
It is a very important problem, but to realize the problem, I think there are some building blocks that need to be there. First of all, the enterprise has to be ready with all their data in one place, being ready with their analytics pipelines, their ETL, for them to figure out that now they need to establish the linkages and they're ready for analysis. And that is the problem, that is the time at which when they realize that there are five records belonging to one customer and they're not able to tie it together. So for entity resolution to really happen, some of the building blocks need to be in place, and that is what we are seeing emerging more and more, that the base stack for companies is ready, and that's why the need for entity resolution is growing.
Nice. Okay. So why did you choose to work on entity resolution? Like, why is it exciting?
So I chose to work on it primarily because I failed, to solve it in my first go. I was working as a data consultant. I was tasked with building a data lake, and we had to resolve some entities from multiple databases. And when we got to solving it, it was like we really, really had a tough time. And that's where it hit me. And I saw this problem again and again as part of my consulting, and I felt that one, this is a tough problem to solve. Second is that it is a problem, if solved in a very domain agnostic way, can actually serve multiple industries, multiple data sets. So that's what excites me very much.
Nice, got it. So you're building Zing, right, which is an open source project to solve this problem. Can you give us a high level overview of how Zing works?
So Zing, as an open source project, what it does is a very simple workflow. What you say is that here is my, here are my records. Here are the attributes on which I want to match. Some of these attributes I am okay to have variations. Some of these attributes I want them to exactly match. So what we call is fuzzy and exact matching, and that's what you configure in the system, and you tell where the data is residing. And then Zing starts showing you some pairs, asks you to tell it whether it's whether they are matches or non-matches according to your business logic. And pretty much you run a few rounds like that, the AI models behind Zing start getting refined, and pretty much after a few rounds of labeling, you are kind of set with your entity resolution models.
Cool. Can you briefly shed some light on the difference between using Zing versus building one's own models using SQL?
So, see, entity resolution can be, as simple as maybe in some cases, you have a user email already, and then you know that these two records with this email belong to the same individual, and if you have guest checkouts, and if you the user finally checks in, logs in, and then you capture that email, you know how to associate the anonymous activity with the logged in activity and the user ID. If it is as simple as one or two systems and very deterministic attributes on which you can actually link and match, I think it is okay to go with the SQL, and it's a fair choice to make. But in most cases, what happens is there are multiple sources from which the data is coming. They all have variations across name, across age, across address, across telephone numbers, across multiple emails. And then, with the growing size of data as well as the variation in the attributes, this becomes an increasingly tougher problem to solve, because if like it's a classic join problem, right? We all talk about tuning your joins in a database, but then if you don't have unique identifiers, really what are you going to join on? So it gets very complex fairly quickly, and I think that's where you have to differentiate understanding your data, and differentiate whether a simplistic SQL model is good enough for you, or a more advanced solution or across multiple attributes, also fuzzy and deterministic matching, is something that your data set needs.
Gotcha. And can you tell us how this approach differs from the identity resolution capabilities offered
Yes.
by CDP vendors?
So CDP vendors, so one is like Zingg is entity resolution, which is like, a much broader problem statement across different languages, across scale, across entities. But just coming to identity resolution per se, most CDPs, they're like a third party system, right? They're not working directly on your warehouse. So your data warehouse still has, these unresolved entities. The CDP data is actually with the CDP vendor, which you again have to probably get back into your systems. Zing, on the other hand, works natively on the warehouse or the data lake. So you have control over your matching process, the frequency at which you are running, over your data model. So CDPs define their own data models. Zing is very flexible about you defining your own data model. And I think the whole approach to Zing is favoring different use cases and various varieties of data, which the CDP in a very minimal sense does. But obviously, I mean, Zing is a very focused product for entity resolution compared to the offerings by CDPs.
Great, that makes sense. And since you mentioned use cases, so besides the classic ID resolution use case, what are some other important use cases of entity resolution?
Yeah, so I think in the web world, right, we talk about CDPs and we know like identity resolution, but identity resolution in the web world is a very marketing or a sales, defined need. But when you look at traditional industries like banking or healthcare, so there are a lot of compliance. There's a lot of know your customer, anti money laundering, GDPR, healthcare provider data. So in healthcare, you have like Sunshine Act, where you have to be as a healthcare company, you have to declare what is your affiliation with healthcare providers. So those are things where in all those cases you actually need to resolve those entities, the various touch points which you've had with these entities. So beyond the classic CDP identity resolution, entity resolution by itself has a lot more use cases.
Great. And can you briefly explain how e-commerce merchants can benefit from entity
Yeah.
resolution?
So that's interesting, because the first use case that is going into production with Zing is actually an e-commerce use case. We have a user who is building a review website for products, and they have their team has scraped product data from multiple websites, which they are resolving. The product data they are resolving through Zing and then putting in the reviews. So that is one very very item matching use case, product catalog item matching. Then the other is the guest checkout, and then realizing that somebody has checked out, so the user journey, the customer 360 for the user. So those are broadly two use cases in the e-commerce space.
Great. Thank you, Sonal. And last question for you. What's your main piece of advice for companies looking to get started with entity resolution in general and identity resolution in particular?
I would say that know your data. No, no. I think just with any data project, right? Know your data. Start small with one or two use cases or one or two data sets. Don't underestimate entity resolution.
Amen to that. Thank you for your time. Thank you for answering my question and sharing your insights.
Absolutely thrilled
Great.
to be here. Yeah, thank you so much, Arpit, for making me speak.
Have data questions? Get expert answers from practitioners on ask.asterisk.com.